hi guys. My name is Korshenko Alexey, and first of all, I would like to say a few words about myself. I have been working in Magenta not so long. I have begun my work in expert consulting group department, and after a few months, I have been moved to a core department. Unfortunately, I didn't work as a core developer on the Magenta 1 project. But from the first day of my work in this department, I start work with Magenta 2. During last year, we have created a list of valuable features and improved existing functionality in Magenta 2. Magenta 2 code, this is a clear code that works, and I'm really proud of this. Finally, Magenta 2 code started covers with automatic test. Currently, I can't imagine development process without, for example, unit or integration tests. But today, we are not talking about automatic test in Magenta. Today, I am going to tell you. Oh, sorry. I am going to tell you about concept of Magenta areas and some backend new features. Okay, first our topic is Magenta area introduction, and this is a new concept of presentation layer in Magenta. In Magenta 2, we have decided to improve and formalize presentation layer. As you can see on this slide, we have different types of end user. The first one is front-end user. This user works with front-end of our Magenta installation. For example, if we talk about, when we talk about some product, this user see product image, price, and description, and of course this user can buy this product. When admin user works with the same product, he will see this product as an edit form. This user can change all information about this product. And the last one user type is service. This is this user of our API functionality. When this user works with the same product, he will see this product as an XML data. As you can see, all of these users have the same presentation of the same data. The only difference between this user is which part of presentation layer they use to access data. Let's look more detail. Which components are responsible for presentation layer? First of all, we get request from some user. Our front controller gets from configuration all registered routers. Router extract all required parameters from requests such as module name, controller name, and action, and trying to find a needed controller. Of course, our controller can access database using data models. And in layout updates, we have some handle that is related with this controller action. And our view and blocks can also access data layer using data models. Let's look which components from this diagram are responsible for data presentation. Of course, this is a view and blocks. This is a related controller, and this is a router that create instance of that controller. That's why in Magenta 2 we say that this group of components are responsible, for example, for front-end presentation. And if you want to create a new presentation, we have to create a new set of these components. And in this case, we get backend and API presentation. How to create a new presentation layer? In Magenta 1, we have a clear answer to this question. How to create new presentation layer? What exactly developer must create? We have a clear answer to this question in Magenta 1. But in Magenta 2, we have simple and clear answer to this question. You have to create new area. What is Magenta area? Magenta area, this is a layer that contains user-oriented functionality, which is responsible for managing user interaction with the system and consists of components that provide a common bridge into the core business logic encapsulated in the main logic layer. As you can see on this slide, we have data layer, we have domain logic layer, and our presentation layer. And our presentation layer contains different areas, area 1 and others. Okay. which components does area consist of? As I have mentioned previously, this is a router. This is some controller, base controller area. And each area has to have area configuration. And there is one more required area component. This is area code. About responsibilities of each of these controllers, of each of these components, I will tell you a few minutes later. First of all, let's talk where these components has to be located. Okay, all Magenta logic and functionality currently are located in different modules. Magenta area, this is also a part of Magenta functionality. That's why in Magenta 2 we say area components have to be located in a special module, and this module in Magenta 2 is named area module. This is maybe a new type of module in Magenta 2. In this slide we can see minimal set of components of some area. The first one is router. Each area has to have router. Router, this is an entry point to the area. If this router is excluded from configuration, in this case we can easily say that this area isn't accessible. None of area controllers, none of area view resources won't be accessible at all. Area router exactly knows how to extract all required area parameters from the request. For example, module name, controller name, action name, and maybe some additional parameters for some area. And base controller. Base area controller provides all required and common behavior for all controllers that are represented in this area. And area configuration. Oh, we have to go to the next slide. This is area configuration. Area configuration has to be declared in a global scope, in a special node named area. On this slide we see this node, and this is area code. Magenta 2 uses this code when it wants to decide which part of configuration it has to use, which group of view resources, which group of controllers they are allowed to use for presentation layer in this area. And in this way you can configure area router. Each area has to have at least one router, but you are allowed to have as router as you wish per area, in each area. And base controller. All controllers that are represented in this area has to be a child of a base controller. In other case, this controller won't be accessible. Okay? Next. Working on area concept creation in Magenta 2, we have defined a list of requirements which each area has to meet. And these requirements in Magenta 2 are named 5 laws of area. And the first law that module is independent from area. Area is responsible for presentation layer. Module can use area resources just for own presentation layer in this area. And if area is disabled, we will lose entry point to module's presentation in this area. That's why if you create a new model and this model is represented in some area, you must not have dependencies on area module. Okay, and the next law is ability to disable area. For example, if you want to disable something in Magenta, of course you can use this tool. But if you want to disable area, I not recommend you to use this. You have to, area is declared in a separate module, and if this module is disabled, we will disable whole area that is declared in this module. As you can see, in Magenta 2 area, we can easy and simple, in a simple way to disable each area in Magenta. Okay, and the next law is area disabling doesn't disable any other modules. Modules doesn't have dependencies on area module. if area is disabled, modules represented in this area won't be disabled. And these modules will continue to work in other areas without losing any functionality for other areas. As you can see on the slide, we have our Magenta installation, which have, for example, 3 different areas: front-end, back-end, and API area, and we have a list of modules. Each module can be represented in different areas, for example. And when we disable API area, our modules successfully continue to work in backend and front-end area without losing any functionality. Okay. And the next one that, oh, I like it, go. Area is independent from each other. Area mustn't use resources of another area and mustn't have any data models. For example, if and as you can see, we have data layer, domain logic layer, and presentation layer, and we have different areas. And each area has own area resources, and they would use just own resources. If some area, why area cannot have any data models? Because if some area provide some data model, and you use this model in your models, you have to create depends on this model. But according to area concept, you mustn't have dependencies on area models. That's why area cannot have data models. It's clear, okay? And the last one is ability to area is indivisible. All required area resources and resources that this area provides for modules represented in this area mustn't have an ability to work separately. This functionality has to be disabled simultaneously. For example, if you want to use this car for driving somewhere, you can use this car because this car has at least 2 wheels. If you want to use this car for driving somewhere, this car has to have 4 wheels, and in this case you can go somewhere. And for example, if you have some area and authorization and authentication mechanism for this area is required, you can't use this area without this mechanism. That's why in Magenta 2 we say that area is indivisible. That's all about area concept, and the next our topic is request dispatching process changes. I want to start this topic from review of one problem that we have in Magenta 1. This is a problem is controller naming conflict. For example, we have 2 different modules, Mage Customer and Mage Catalog, and each of these modules have controller, Mage Customer, admin HTML index controller, and Mage Catalog, admin HTML index controller. From point of view of controller naming, everything right. But let's look which URLs we have to use when we want to access these controllers in Magenta 1. We have to use this URL, magenta.com, for example, admin index edit, and magenta.com admin index edit. As you can see, we have the same URL for different controllers, and this is control naming conflict. Of course, in Magenta 1 you can easily resolve this conflict by controller renaming, and you can rename your controllers in this way. For example, Mage Customer admin HTML customer index controller and Mage Catalog admin HTML catalog index controller, and we will get new URLs for this controller: admin customer index edit and admin catalog index edit. That's all. Conflict is resolved. But why do we need to have such a natural controller name? We have word duplication in our controller names: customer, customer, catalog, catalog. We have to create extra subdirectory in our module. That's why our developer isn't happy. In Magenta 2, you can use this controller name without any word duplication, without any subdirectory. And you can use this URL when you want to access these controllers. And our developers are really happy. But how this was done? In Magenta 2, we have changed backend URL composition. In Magenta 1, we have this URL composition: base URL, module front name, controller, and action. And you always have to use admin as a module front name when you work in backend area in Magenta 1. But in Magenta 2, we have changed this composition. And currently, this composition have 4 components. The first one is area front name, module front name, controller, and action. And in Magenta 2, you can use any module front name when you work in Magenta area. This approach gives us at least 2 valuable capabilities. The first one, we have resolved controller naming conflict. And the second one is that area front name, this is a fast and easy way to identify requested area. Area router just extract first parameter from request, this is area front name, and get this area front name from area configuration, and using simple string comparison can give us a fast negative answer if requested URL doesn't belong to this area and gives control to another router. Our router doesn't try to find controller file name, include this file, create a controller instance, and doesn't try to find action of these controllers. He just compared to string and give us answer. Very simple. And the next our topic is admin navigation menu configuration changes. Why did we change this configuration? Because in Magenta 2, we want to have admin navigation menu more flexible. Because we want to have an ability to change menu structure with XML directives. Because we want to have an ability to change menu structure on a code level. Because we want to have an ability to validate menu configuration. And the one more reason is that menu configuration in Magenta 2 is located in a separate file. According to area concept, all specific area configuration has to be located in an ATC subdirectory and in a special subdirectory, and the name of this subdirectory has to be the same as area code. I will show you on the next slide. Menu configuration, this is specific backend area configuration. That's why this configuration was moved to this file. Okay, this is an example of, all you know very well, this configuration. This is an example of menu configuration in Magenta 1. We have this format. But in Magenta 2, we have new format. This is. And as I have mentioned previously, we have this configuration in a separate file named menu.xml in a directory ATC admin.html subdirectory. As you can see on this slide, we are transformed all menu items subnodes to specific attributes, and we have these actions in a menu. We have different types of actions. This is an add instruction, update instruction, and remove instruction. In Magenta 2, each menu item has to have a resource. What is resource? Resource is an identifier of ACL resource. This is new required attributes for menu item in Magenta 2. But you can change menu configuration in Magenta 2 on a code level too. And, oh, sorry. This is an example of menu configuration, started menu configuration in Magenta of Enterprise Edition. For example, you want to change this structure in this way. Because you every day use these items, dashboard, catalog, sales and customer, but other items you use very seldom. That's why you want to create a new item named other and group this item under this. In Magenta 1, you can do this in Enterprise Edition. But in Magenta 2, you can do this and you need just 2 minutes for total changing of menu configuration. You have to use, for example, this configuration. In this row, we created a new item with the title Other, and we update all needed menu items and set new parent attributes for this item. As you can see, this is very simple, and we totally change our menu structure for backend. And you can change menu structure on a code level, or for example, you can create new items dynamically from some conditions, for example, in your system. For this, you have to subscribe on a new event named backend menu load after. You have to create your own observer, and you have to get menu object from event object. And if you want to create new menu item, you have to use match backend model menu item factory for item creation. Using this code, you can create, you could add new item on a top level, and you can use this code if you want to add submenu. This is an identifier of parent item. Simple change. And if you want to modify existing menu item, you have to get this item from menu object and set new values for needed attribute. And the last one is using this code, we can change menu structure. We can remove item and all sub-items. We can move some items or reorder. Change sort ordering of this item. Okay, that's all. And the next, our topic is ACL declaration and user changes. Why did we change ACL configuration? Because we want to validate ACL configuration. Because we want to simplify ACL configuration and remove extra nodes. And ACL configuration is in a separate file too. Because ACL configuration is also area-specific configuration. That's why in Magento 2 we have removed admin.html.xml file at all from our system. Because this file just contains ACL and menu configuration. And in Magento 2, this configuration allocated in a different separate files. That's why we don't need to use this file. That's why we have removed it. This is an example of ACL configuration in Magento 1. All of you know very well this configuration. And this is an example of the same configuration in Magento 2. As you can see, the resource item subnodes are transformed into specific attributes, and our attributes currently have a unique identifier. And if we compare this configuration, you can see that this is Magento 1 configuration and this is Magento 2 configuration. And ACL configuration is half less in Magento 2. And our developer, again, happy. According to these changes in configuration, we have to change the ACL usage. This example of if you want to know if some resource is allowed for some role in Magento 1, you have to use this code. But in Magento 2, you have to use this code. What is the difference? The first difference is that currently in Magento 2 we don't use ACL resource path when we want to know if this resource is allowed for some role. We have to use resource identifier instead of. This approach gives us ability to be independent from ACL tree structure. And for example, if we change this tree in the future, our functionality will continue to work without any breaking or losing in our and in yours extensions. And the next one is that in Magento 2, we don't use admin session when we want to know if some resource is allowed for some role, because this is not responsibility of admin session. We have created new model, and this is Mage Core Model Authorization. And this is the themes of our next topic. Authorization mechanism. Authorization and authentication mechanism, this is required backend resources. That's why this functionality are moved to backend model. Okay, this is our authorization object. This is Mage Core Model Authorization model. When we talk about authorization, we always know that there are several objects involved in this process. The first one is user role, some user role, and the next one is ACL. Let's look more detail to this component. The first component, user role, in Magenta 2 is represented by role locator. The responsibility of role locator just to provide a role identifier of currently logged in user and gives this user role to authorization object. Very simple. And the next one is a policy. What is the policy? In Magenta 2 we have implemented two different policies. The first one is policy default. This policy allows everything for any user. And for example, if in your Magenta installation you have just one admin user in your backend area, you can use this policy default, and in this way you can increase performance of your backend area. And the next policy is policy ACL. We use this policy by default for backend area. This policy uses access control list for checking user permission. When we talk about ACL policy, we have to know that this policy has to know about ACL resources. This policy has to know about all registered roles, and this policy has to know about role permissions. Let's look at this component. ACL resources. This component is provided by a resource loader. This is a model of our backend area. This model just reads all ACL XML configuration files, gets these resources from these files, and populate ACL object with this data. That's all, very simple. And the next one is a component, this registered roles, and this component is provided by a role loader. The responsibilities of a role loader is just get all registered role in Magenta from database and populate ACL object with this data. And the last one is rule loader. What is the rule? Rule, this is relations between role and resources. Rule says us which resources are allowed for some role. And rule loader just read this configuration from database too and populate our ACL object with this data. Okay. As you can see, in Magenta 2 we have 5 different components for backend area in authorization mechanism. You can either change or substitute each of these components, and in this way you can change whole authorization mechanism. Okay, let's look how this authorization mechanism is configured. This is an example of ACL configuration for backend area. Authorization mechanism in Magenta 2 is implemented in a library level. That's why we can reuse this mechanism in every area in Magenta. For this you have to describe this node ACL in your area, and you have to specify two required configuration node. This is a policy, and this is a role locator. That's all. This will be enough if you want to use authorization mechanism in any Magenta area. But if you use policy ACL, you have to specify resource loader, and you have to specify rule and role loader. As you can see on the slide, this node is resource loader, role loader, and policy. These models are provided by a backend area. But the other two models, this is rule and role loader, these models works with the database directly. Our backend area mustn't have any data model. That's why our authorization process just declares some interface and wants that some module in Magenta provides model that implement this interface. We work with these models by some interface. We doesn't care about this model at all. And as you can see on the slide, these models are provided by Mage user. This is a new model in Magenta 2. Okay, and the next and last our topic is authentication and credential storage. Authentication in Magenta 2 this is a backend area resources. That's why this functionality and this logic is moved to this area. And authentication process in Magenta 2 works independently from a credential storage. By default, we use database and table admin user, and in this table we store user login, password, and some other information about this user. Backend just declares some interface, Mage backend model aus credential storage interface, and wants that some module provide some credential storage model that implements this interface. Backend just get login and password from some user and give this login password to this model. He don't care about in which way this model try to find this user and compare this login password, encrypt and decrypt this data. He just want to get this, to put these parameters to this model and give and takes a response from this object. Yes, I know this user, or I see the user first time. Oh, sorry. That's all. And for example, if you want to store your credential storage in a different storage, for example, in a text file, XML file, or I know a third-party system using web API functionality, something like this, you can easily substitute this credential storage. And in Magenta 2, for example, you can use XML data for storing your credential storage. Let's look how this mechanism is configured. Backend area just declare empty node, aus. That's all. And he wants that some module fill this node. And this is substitution of credential storage by module Mage user. Module Mage user provides us Mage user, model user, and this is a credential storage for our backend area. And using this configuration, you can easily change this model by your own model. Thank you, guys. That's all. If you have any question, I can answer.
Like now, we can have more than one model that provides user database. Credentials or one of the, no, only one. Only one.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, okay.
The question is, can we have more than one credential storage model in Magenta 2? The answer is no. We can in one time we can have just one credential storage model.
But you can implement two ways for authentication in this one model, can't you?
Sorry, can you repeat? Implement?
When I have a model which checks against an XML file and checks against the database, I have two ways for checking the credentials with one model.
Oh yes, of course, you can implement this. Okay guys, if you have some question, you can ask me on a coffee break and any time. Thank you.